On Monday, we saw the release of Pablo's fifth podcast on the Clippers scandal. We also had Clippers Media Day. So let's take a look at the coverage from the mainstream media. Here we have the NBA. I mean, not the NBA. We have ESPN. So we're just looking through their YouTube page, and we're just going to go through their videos and see what the coverage looks like. I'm not seeing anything so far. Just scrolling down. We're only 21 hours in, though, looking at the video timelines. So continuing on down, we have a LeBron James Media Day interview. We have Luca. And here we have a just below a 9-minute segment on notable Media Day comments, which includes Kawhi Leonard. So we'll look at that in a moment. I'm just going to continue on down just so we can see the latest coverage. We're 2 days in now. And to be fair, there was a lull in the Clippers scandal story until Monday, but I'm just now we're 5 days in, scrolling on down. I'm not seeing anything, so I'm not going to continue on with this. But we are going to go to the Kawhi video, and I want to make sure I'm on the right video. Let's see here. Notable Media Day comments. Let's make sure we got that video. Yes, notable comments at Media Day. So here we have about 40, 50 seconds. Let's actually play this. I want to make sure I'm right.
Conspiracies are this is all new to you guys. The company went bankrupt a while ago.
That voice you heard was our.
All right, so that was 130 seconds of just Kawhi talking at Media Day. Let's actually fast forward because Ramona Shelburne says something very interesting.
Was a lot more than the $7 million that was listed in the bankruptcy filings. And so I appreciate that he did answer my questions. There were a lot of other reporters in the room who wanted to ask questions that weren't called on at this press conference. I know there was a reporter from Sports Illustrated, LA Times, Associated Press. I got 4 or 5 questions in, and then afterwards, nobody else was really called upon to ask any further questions. And so I thought that was interesting because through this whole saga, we have been waiting to hear from Kawhi Leonard and what is his side of the story. And we got a few answers, but I would have liked to have heard more.
You also got to talk.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And here we have representatives from major outlets not getting called on. If you don't get called on, you've got to insist your question is answered. But the Clippers shutting it down on Media Day. So obviously ESPN was going to get their questions. We saw Ramona. She had a good follow-up with Kawhi, but it led to nothing. I think there could have been a lot more that was asked of Kawhi. But of course, this was always going to be curtailed. So this is the ESPN's the ESPN's main channel. So let's go ahead and continue on. And now we have, is this the same video I just pulled up?
Kawhi Leonard answered.
Yeah, same video, I think, right? Because it starts, this might be a different video, but it's really, no, it's the same video. Okay, so let's continue on. And we've got Bill Simmons, and Bill Simmons is, we have this latest video from 13 hours ago. But I've looked at the video and I didn't see anything in the transcript. And then if we look at the actual comments, or not the comments, the description, we don't see this time stamped anywhere. We see an NBA, intriguing NBA storylines. So I could have missed it. I don't think I did. I looked in the transcript, but we'll continue on. Let's go back to Bill's channel. I just want to look through his video library here. These are his most recent videos. So we see some NFL. We see the Rockets in trouble, Jimmy Kimmel, some boxing. And I think, here's where it was. We have Bombergate comedy. So 3 weeks ago, we have the Bombergate comedy segment. I think that was about 22 minutes long. I looked at that in a previous video. But yeah, just not a lot going on here with the Clippers scandal and Bill Simmons. So we're tabbed to Zach Lowe. We have this recent video, which was published. When was this published? September 29th. And I'm looking in the description here. We don't see anything about the Kawhi Leonard Clippers scandal. But let's actually go look at his video library. And I haven't gone to it yet. So let's go to videos. And what do we have? I'm not seeing anything recent. So there could be some stories. 3 weeks ago, we have the Clippers controversy. We also have a reaction to the Kawhi Leonard story with Kirk Goldsberry. But I've already covered this. We also had Bill Simmons on. So in this Bill Simmons episode, we do get Zach talking more about the Clippers scandal. But that's at the beginning, and then when Bill Simmons is on, they talk about the NBA men's basketball team, so their 2028 roster construction for the USA Basketball. So that's for Zach Lowe. Here we have the NBA on ESPN. So we have their channel. So just looking through the videos, here we have the Kawhi Leonard Kawhi confront scandal. So some coverage there. This is a 53-minute, 27-second podcast that we'll get to. It's from the Hoop Collective. Here we have the coverage of the Kawhi's press conference. Let's actually click on this. I want to see see if this is similar to
Kawhi,
we have Kawhi. No, this is just the press conference. So this is just Kawhi speaking. Let's see here. Let's go down, see what else we have. Scrolling down. I'm not seeing nothing standing out to me. Doesn't mean that none of these videos touch on it, but yeah, we're in 2 weeks, and we know that they initially had a Hoop Collective podcast on this. We have the latest from the NBA and the Board of Governors, but this was from 2 weeks ago. We have more. We definitely have coverage from 2 weeks ago on the NBA on ESPN. But let's actually go back, and here we have Media Day. And then, so this reaction story, I think we've got this pulled up. Yeah, we've got reaction. So this is actually just under 5 minutes of reaction. What you have here is Brian Windhorst recapping, and let's actually listen to part of this.
And Steve Ballmer and Dennis Wong, that there was money going from them to this company. There's no doubt that there was money going back to the Clippers. There's no doubt that there was money promised to, I don't know how much he got, going to Kawhi. So there's a bunch of money going around. Pablo Torre has reported on all that. He has documents to back that up. Nobody has denied that there's not money that's going around. The terms and understanding of what happened with that money as was moving around, that's what this is all about.
Okay, so that's really, I don't really consider that coverage because he's just recapping what has already been known and stating there hasn't been any counter to that. So that's not really, that's not what I'd really consider coverage, but they're talking about it. So I think from ESPN side, it is important that they at least have some, we'll call it coverage, but they have some content on the scandal.
Well,
It's going to be a while before we can figure it out. Yes,
there's no doubt that it stinks. It's like, hey, will the NBA find, or the NBA's investigators find evidence that puts Adam Silver, not exactly a commissioner known to be tough on crime, that puts him in a position where he's comfortable issuing severe punishment? It stinks, but is there the evidence that makes a soft on crime commissioner comfortable taking action?
That's
okay. So at least, what is his name? I can't. Is it Tim McMahon? So Tim McMahon. One thing I like about him is he's blunt. I know he, not everybody gets along with him. I don't know that much about him. I only find out about Tim through clips and, just various articles. But here he actually states that Adam Silver is soft on crime. So at least we have that. And then he really gets at just, is Adam Silver going to be in a position where he has to come down on the Clippers? So we'll keep it here. This entire segment on the Clippers was about 5 minutes, just under 5 minutes. So then we have this other NBA on ESPN. This is recent coverage. We have 45 seconds of Kawhi's press conference, and then we have Ramona Shelburne in studio. So let's go ahead and listen to some of her biggest takeaways.
Any services, and he said, I don't think that's accurate. Now, that would have been a time to provide some examples of work that he may have done or had been contracted to do that didn't happen. And instead, he continued to talk about, this is old, this happened a few years ago, you guys are just now finding out. I also wanted to know, and I think we all want to know, how much of that $28 million you were contracted for were you actually paid? Yeah. And he said, I'll have to check my books, but in the bankruptcy filing, he was listed as being owed $7 million. He said, I'm owed a lot more than that. So in other words, even though he was contracted for
All right, so there's some discussion here, but it doesn't last long. I think it lasts... let's see here. So she, at about 2 minutes and let's say 25 seconds in, then we get into the impact of the Clippers. So it's more generalized, just not a lot of in-depth coverage, but Ramona Shelburne is at least acting as some placeholder coverage where we do see her asking some, getting into some of what we'd want to, we'd be interested in as far as the story. Now we have Ryan Russillo, and just looking at his latest podcast, I don't see any headlines whatsoever on the Clippers scandal. And of course, we know that Ryan covers multiple sports, and he's into the NFL and college football. But of course, one of his strong suits is the NBA, and we just don't see this here. So he's not covering this. What do we have 2 months ago? So we have Front Office Insights with Bobby Marks, but just nothing. I don't see any headlines from Ryan Russillo on the Clippers scandal. All right, so let's continue on with Colin Cowherd. And I don't even know if I'm on the right channel here. Let's actually look at his full channel.
Welcome to the Herd's official YouTube.
And let's go to his videos. And when we look here, Colin's not covering the NBA whatsoever. So there's no problems here. If someone's not covering the NBA, or if this is not what they usually do, then there's no fault. But I wanted to include him. He's got a very, among sports podcasts, among sports channels, Collins is highly viewed, and here he just doesn't cover the NBA, or he does. I mean, obviously he'll sometimes add commentary, but he's just not covering this whatsoever. It's all football, so there's not even any in NBA on his recent podcast. Here we have CBS Sports and NFL dominated. We've got WNBA, we've got MLB, we've got UFC. We have an NBA season preview. Let's keep going back. There's just not a lot here. There's not, they don't cover the NBA a lot, but of what they have, I don't see any coverage here. And we're back 2 days. So let's go ahead and, just to be fair, let's go back even more. I wonder, I'm now at this point, I'm wondering, did they ever cover the Clippers scandal? 7 days ago. And we're at 9 days ago. So let's see if I'll go back to 2 weeks and let's just see. I don't see anything, but I also don't see a lot of basketball. Here we have Jalen Rose talking, but it's not really about the NBA. So we'll try a few more, and I'm just seeing mostly football. So it's not like they cover a lot of basketball, but here there was actually, I think I saw LeBron. Let's see. Yeah, no, I don't think I saw him. Okay, so they don't cover a lot of basketball anyways, but we don't see coverage of the Clippers scandal, which you would think of all of these videos, some of which have very low views relative to others. You'd think there'd be room for a video on the scandal from CBS Sports. Let's continue on to USA Today. So USA Today has a lot of subscribers, but they do not have a lot of views. They have their most recent video was posted 19 hours ago, has 23 views. 1 day ago, 186 views. They just don't get a lot of views, and there's just not a lot of coverage. So USA Today not really covering it. I threw them in here just because I thought of them while I was going through this. Here we have Sports Illustrated, and scrolling down, I know that Rachel Nichols and Chris Mannix have covered this. Here we can see LeBron is cagey. So we have just short of 50 minutes overall podcast, but they do cover the Clippers scandal. And then we have another video here. Kawhi could have explained his aspiration deal. So actually getting into this to a degree. And let's continue on. So we just don't see a lot here from Sports Illustrated, but they have covered it. And I know when Chris Mannix was on Bill Simmons' podcast, he did talk about it. He brought it up, and he was also addressing it seriously. And like you could tell, he was, there was genuine interest in actually covering it and talking about it. But I'm not seeing a lot here otherwise. And I know they've covered it previously, so I think there's another video that we're probably going to come up on it in a moment. So let's see. Let's just scroll down a little bit further and see if I can see a Kawhi story scandal. So I'll go down one more. Okay, here we go. Does the NBA want to take on Steve Ballmer? Oh, that's a good one. That's the type of coverage you're looking for here. That type of podcast. Let's see what else. So I don't see anything else. So they have touched on it, and I think there's the impression I get from Rachel Nichols and Chris Mannix is that they genuinely cover it, but I don't see a lot here. So we'll continue on. And now we are on the Colin Cowherd podcast. So he has the Herd, and I don't it's hard to tell where his podcasts begin and end, and what's under what label. And of course, he's associated with Fox Sports. But I wanted to add him because it's a separate podcast, and here we can see that he's covering football. He's not covering the NBA. So I don't see anything here. So, but you would think, right? Like Colin being an outspoken sports personality, you'd think there'd be something, but there's not. So not that I can see. Here we have Gil's Arena, and I did look at Nick Wright previously. Nick Wright, I also don't see. In fact, let's just go and find Nick Wright, because I want to just show that he is also not covering this. So let's go ahead and look at his podcasts. Let's look at the videos. And here we go. So we have more football, boxing, and to be fair to some of these channels, if they're not covering the NBA whatsoever, like here we do have the best of the Lakers. Oh, but this was 1 month ago. So this is even predating when the scandal came out. So we don't have anything since the scandal from Nick Wright, but we also don't have any NBA. So, I mean, that's at least a card in their favor, is that they're not covering the NBA generally. Here we have Gil's Arena. So this is also very interesting. Gilbert Arenas, always like as outspoken as you can get. What's surprising is he's got Skip Bayless now on his podcast. What did you add Skip Bayless for? But I'm scrolling down here. We see a lot of NFL coverage. We're now 6 days in. Again, Skip Bayless. Why? I just scrolling down here. Got boxing, and I think this is. So what I'm confused with, I think he's got a new logo. It looks like he's taken on the coloring of the Underdog sportsbook or whatever it is. But I don't see it. This actually looks different from the previous Gil's Arena, but I never paid attention that close. I never paid that close of attention to Gil's Arena initially, but I'm looking here and I am seeing a lot of NFL. Here we have Tracy McGrady. All right, this was 2 weeks ago. So you'd think, here more Tracy McGrady. You'd think that there could be a story here. We have Penny Hardaway. So Tracy McGrady talking about Penny Hardaway. Let's see. LeBron would be better than Kobe if he started in LA. So we have some of the stories, the past stories. We have Tracy McGrady, a lot of videos from Tracy. I don't see any coverage of the scandal from Gilbert Arenas, which is very surprising given how much and how far Gilbert Arenas is willing to talk about almost all subjects. Here I've got All the Smoke. And so we're getting in some independents that have a large following, but at the same time, I don't necessarily consider them mainstream, but they're just not they're not the same established networks. It's more like a focused podcast. So I think there's a differentiation here. But looking at All the Smoke, which is over 1.2 million subscribers, we see Daryl Strawberry, we see Andre Miller, we see Kevin Durant and Mike Beasley's rise. Mike Beasley, I'm not seeing it here. I'm not seeing any discussion on this, and no headlines, at least, right? They probably at one point talked about it, but Michael Irvin, and so this is actually predating the scandal at this point, or it's right around that same time. We don't see the smoke. All the Smoke did not want the smoke on this one. There's no headlines for this one. I would think this would be worthy of a podcast, especially relative to the other podcasts. Going now to Club 520, here we have Jeff Teague, and we do have, and I think there's genuine conversation from Jeff Teague. Here we have Jeff Teague reacting to Kawhi's comments. I haven't watched this episode. But I did look back, and they've covered this previously when it first came out. So here we have really a side story. Did the Clippers leak that they were wanting to move on from Kawhi? If we go back, and we're at 2 weeks, so it should be coming up, we do see that Jeff Teague has covered this. So where was it? Oh, so Jeff Teague reacts to the NBA investigating the Clippers. Clippers cheating scandals. We have more on this. So initially, like the other media outlets, we do have some coverage here. And I actually pulled up one of the videos where he talks about it. There wasn't, I think they had like there was at least
Nah, man. Have y'all seen this information?
the hint of an organic conversation where Jeff Teague seemed like he was reacting naturally. One of the reasons I looked into it was because I remember when he said LeBron was on steroids, and he immediately took that back. And so I was curious to see if he was going to talk about the scandal, and he does. One interesting note: when I played a section from this video, he's almost in admiration of Kawhi, Ben Simmons, and Joel Embiid, because they were able to make so much money without having played that much. If you listen to him, that's the takeaway that I got from it. And I think it's this podcast, Jeff Teague Reacts to Clippers and Kawhi NBA Scandal. So it's not nearly the extensive coverage that you'd want for a scandal that is the biggest NBA story in the last at least decade, and likely beyond that. And there's the very real potential that this is the biggest NBA story of all time, like of everything, right? Like when we look back in history of all of the stories that have come out for the NBA, obviously the one that comes to the front of my mind is with you have to think about the Tim Donaghy betting scandal. But this has the potential to be even bigger, especially if it keeps going, especially as we see other parties potentially implicated here. This has the potential to really be the biggest story of all time. And we just don't see a lot of coverage from the media, and for the large part, they appear disinterested. Now, for a podcast like Jeff Teague, maybe this isn't something they're really going to get into. So you can't really, I wouldn't hold it against Jeff Teague. He has talked about it. So at that point, it's like, okay, you've talked about it. That's not really what you're going to look into. So at least you didn't shy away from it, right? But with Bill Simmons, like he's the one where I zero in on, and it's like, if you're Bill Simmons, this is you. I would think there would be Emergency Pod, and there would be so many other episodes where we're following up and we're just looking at this as the news is pouring out. And that just hasn't been the case. Zach Lowe has covered it multiple times, I think, to a somewhat fair extent. I think Zach Lowe has said what he has to say. But we also saw on Monday that Pablo had another significant podcast episode where he talks about Steve Ballmer donating to Joe Sandberg's charity in 2024. I don't see any discussion around that. And so I think there could be part of this could be, hey, we don't want to promote another channel by talking even more about the scandal. But he came out with the news. How can you get around this fact? This guy has done the work. He's done the investigative journalism. And now the story's being, to a degree, ignored. So we saw ESPN look at the media day, but where is the in-depth coverage? Because this story is so significant that it merits the coverage. And let's now look. I want to show you just the contrast here. And I've really focused on this story because it's worth the story, and because I'm interested in it, and because the other outlets that I would turn to aren't covering it. So that's in part why I started posting again, because I was like, this needs to be covered. I wanted to just break it down, but we don't see this level of detail, and we can look at other podcasts, other independents, and I don't think this is getting the attention that it deserves. And even, Pablo's done all the work here, right? So now it's a matter of just looking at what Pablo's done, looking at some of the collateral stories that have come out, like how come Mark Cuban's furious defense of Steve Ballmer isn't being looked at by more people. But looking at my video wall here, I've inserted some other videos topics recently. I talked about the decline of Las Vegas, but here we have the media day reaction, the reaction to Mark Cuban's tweets, and just his incessant defending of Steve Ballmer at all costs. You have the live stream where I talk about Pablo's latest podcast, and I'll probably get into more of the details. That was more. So I have the reaction, And then I have the analysis where I actually break down what Pablo's talking about and look at it from that angle. I have a few other podcasts. Then I have What Did Adam Silver Know? This is one. I think this podcast has potential. If this story keeps going the way that it's going, and if Pablo has more in store for us, if he's going to continue dripping, I think this video has a chance to come up again. So this is What Did Adam Silver Know About Aspiration before Pablo Torre's podcast. So the question that's not being asked, everybody's focused in on the lie, understandably so, but then there's also the matter of, hey, Adam Silver just said that he knew about aspiration. Okay, so at first he said he didn't know. Then he said he did know. That leads to the question, okay, what did you know about aspiration? When did you know it? And what had you learned leading up to the initial podcast release? There are multiple questions here that are very interesting regarding Adam Silver. And if nothing else, of course, we have the lie and the fact that he lied. He volunteered that information about not knowing about aspiration without being asked, do you know about aspiration? This video only has 570 views, but I do think I think there's a potential for it to be relevant later. So I will link to the Adam Silver video in the description. The Dennis Wong investment. This one is the Dennis Wong side of this is somewhat overlooked. It's not overly interesting, but here I covered Dennis Wong's nearly $2 million investment into aspiration. And I think that was 9 days before Kawhi got paid in December of, 22, I think. Then we have here this coverage on, there's a lot of people that say if Kawhi had just retweeted aspiration, if he had just planted one tree, then this could have all been prevented. That's actually not the case. Maybe it would have prevented this, but technically, if we look at the collective bargaining agreement, Pablo still has a story here because you can't receive $28 million and then make someone a cupcake, give them that cupcake and said, well, we've done something, it's Kawhi and it's okay, so now we've got this equal exchange here. No, you have to provide fair market value. And it says that in the CBA. So we would look to Kawhi's Adidas contract. We would look to the other celebrities, the A-list celebrities that are way higher in status than Kawhi. And we'd look to see how much they got paid and see if the fair market value was in line here. So even if Kawhi had posted a few tweets, that's not going to stop this scandal from existing because Pablo Torre is still going to have the investigative journalism. And we're going to be able to see that there's an unequal exchange here of $28 million, or if you want to count the stock options, $48 million in exchange for what? A few tweets. That still doesn't work under the CBA. We've also had a deep analysis of Mark Cuban's defense of Steve Ballmer. So I went and looked at when Pablo Torre had Mark Cuban on, and I looked at every one of Mark's defenses, and also Pablo's points, and just analyzed them. Because that's also a very telling episode, just generally from the standpoint of Mark cannot stop defending Steve Ballmer, and he has continued on until this day, or at least a few days ago. So, anyways, the point is that I think this is the coverage that the Pablo Torre story deserves. Now, for these other outlets, they only have so many reporters, etc. But this is a major scandal, and you'd think there would be more coverage. And with ESPN, we know they're entertainment. We know they're not really serious about looking into this. It's more about, do we have a story? Can we get Stephen A. Smith? That's someone so Stephen A. Smith has had for someone being so outspoken, he's been very quiet on this and also very reserved in his initial reaction. So he targeted Kawhi Leonard and really focused in on the fact that Kawhi Leonard has sat out so long and still gets paid, and no matter what, he keeps re-upping the contract. He goes in on Kawhi, but as far as Steve Ballmer, from what I recall from the clip, it's more like, I know Steve Ballmer to be a good man. This certainly warrants an investigation. Quite a mild reaction for someone whose nickname is Screamin'. So there's been a lot of light coverage. Brian Windhorst, I really like Brian Windhorst. Normally so straightforward. Here, very pulled back, very much like, let's recap what we have in place and just see how this thing plays out. And then let's see. And you don't even have to come to the conclusion that the Clippers circumvented the salary cap, but you do need to, I think, to have honest coverage, right? To have coverage where it's unbiased and you're just generally looking into something that is a major story, to just talk about it and talk through it and look through some of the details. Okay, here's what Pablo has uncovered, because Pablo's done all of the work here. Now it's just a matter of looking at what we have, analyzing it, talking it through. And speaking of other people that are absent in this, where is Bill Simmons, right? Bill Simmons has looked just a few weeks ago with Zach Lowe. They're talking about the 2028 Team USA men's basketball team roster construction. Okay, maybe you didn't want to talk about it that much when it initially released, but in the words of paraphrasing Zach Lowe and Van Lathan, this is a major scandal, probably the biggest story in the last decade. Where are you at? Where is the coverage? Why are you not analyzing this? The fallout, how this affects the Clippers roster, and just so many other details that we could go into. Here we have it's not a crime, but something of a corporate thriller, right? Or a sports thriller that's unfolding in front of us, and just not a lot of reaction, not a lot of analysis, but it's something I'm interested in, and just reading through the comments and the feedback I get, something a lot of other people are interested in too, but the mainstream media is not. So I've covered this in depth, and I wanted to contrast what I'm doing with the other channels, and it's obviously I can focus in on this, they cannot focus in on this, but at the same time, you would think there'd be more to it, more substance. Let's look into this further. At the very least, whenever Pablo releases a podcast, it's newsworthy. He just had his 5th podcast. There were some good bullet points in there. So that's worth talking about, right? Like if you're an NBA podcast, it's worth talking about. This is a story that directly affects the Clippers. Here we have it's like there's like a box of kittens, and it's the box tips over and the cats are going everywhere and they're going every direction but the Pablo Torre investigative journalism. So not a lot. The Athletic, by the way, has covered this. I didn't talk about the Athletic, but Pablo's connected to the Athletic, so the Athletic does have some coverage. Of course, Pablo Torre finds out is the source here. He is directly connected to Dan Le Batard under the Meadowlark Media Company. And so Pablo, I think, is an employee there who also holds equity stake. I'm going to talk about Meadowlark Media more because it interests me now that we have Pablo working under the Meadowlark banner to see how that's unfolded. So I'm just going to look at some of the information out there and have a breakdown of Meadowlark Media. But this is the media coverage, and I wanted to update this. Of course, there's been some media coverage since the story initially broke, but especially you'd expect a spike as a result of the latest podcast episode, as a result of the Clippers Media Day scandal. And as we've gone over, some entities have covered this, some have not, and to varying degrees. I definitely don't expect the detail that I've gone into, but I would expect there to be more coverage.